Iran calls it a helpless and nervous ultimatum. But is the U.S. willing to commit war crimes rather than back down? Closing the Strait of Hormuz to enemy vessels has helped Iran double its oil profits since the war began. So is Trump's threat to level civilian infrastructure if the strait isn't reopened a sign of true desperation? And is Iran calling Trump's bluff? I'm Andrea Sankey, and this is the Newsmakers. April 7th is now the latest deadline, attempting to force Iran to, at the very least, reopen the Strait of Hormuz. It's not clear how strictly that date will be enforced, but given what many describe as President Trump's unhinged social media post, it might be hard for him to chicken out this time without losing face entirely. But what Trump is threatening as a consequence would mean a violation of the Geneva Conventions. So what options are really left, and with what repercussions? Here's a look.
A profanity-laden Truth Social post from the US president has even caught some of his own supporters off guard. On Sunday, Trump posted online that Iran had until Tuesday to reopen the Strait of Hormuz to shipping, or he'd unleash hell by bombing bridges and power plants. Iran promised to respond in like manner if attacked.
Iran's reaction would be one of reciprocating any such attack. Our armed forces have made it clear that in case Iran's infrastructure is attacked, we would react in kind.
Iran's cultural affairs minister even questioned Trump's sanity.
Trump is an unstable, delusional figure marked by a set of contradictions. Iranian society generally does not pay attention to his statements, as it believes he lacks personal, behavioral, and verbal balance and constantly shifts between contradictory positions.
And in Washington, a rare moment of bipartisan criticism of the US president. Marjorie Taylor Greene, a former Republican member of Congress and once one of Trump's loudest allies within the MAGA movement, urged the Trump administration to beg for divine forgiveness, described the president as mad, and said threats to bomb Iranian power plants and bridges did not help anyone, calling the plan evil. Threats aside, several outlets are reporting that the US and Iran have both received a ceasefire framework process plan involving a 45-day halt in fighting and the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. But sources suggest Iran will not reopen the strait as part of a temporary ceasefire.
When it comes to defending the country against criminal aggressors, restraint has no meaning at all. Therefore, it is natural that in defending the country, the Islamic Republic of Iran will use all its capacities and capabilities, both inside the country and at the regional level, to make the enemy regret its actions.
Iran has a financial incentive to keep up pressure on the waterway. Shipping companies fear the threat of Iranian strikes on their crew and cargo, leading to the new practice of paying Iran for safe passage. In what has come to be nicknamed Tehran's toll booth, payments amounting to and even exceeding $2 million per ship ensure unimpeded passage through the choke point without being fired upon by Iran. Tehran is earning close to double the amount of money it used to from oil exports, according to some financial estimates. On Monday, the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard's intelligence organization was confirmed dead. Majid Kademi spent decades in intelligence and counter-espionage roles within Iran's security apparatus, and became the head of intelligence for the IRGC in 2025, after his predecessor's death in airstrikes. The ongoing war also prompted the finance ministers of 5 EU countries to push for a windfall tax on energy companies to help offset rising energy costs to consumers. With one more day until the US president's deadline for his threat to bomb bridges and power plants in Iran, the war is resting on a precipice, and the world holds its breath.
Meanwhile, Israel's defense ministry says it will continue striking national infrastructure in Iran with full force as Trump's deadline approaches. So joining me now to debate what could come are from the Iranian capital, Professor of American Cultural Studies at the University of Tehran, Zohreh Kharazmi. From London, former senior advisor at the U.S. Department of State and visiting fellow at King's College London, Negah Angha. And from Washington, former U.S. Secret Service officer and current Sergeant at Arms of the Maryland Republican Party, Barry Donadio. Thank you all so much for being with me. I will start in Tehran. Zohreh, the U.S. deadline to open the Strait of Hormuz or else expires in a matter of hours now. You are in Iran. Are you scared of what could happen?
These are the weeks that the war that was to end in 2-3 days is keeping on. And I think that in the battleground, Americans and even Europeans and their allies in the region will absorb the message that they are having a very bad strategic defeat in the battleground. Even it was actually 1-2 days ago that in Isfahan and Coercive Rahman, you see that there $1 million worth American aircrafts were hit by some locals. And even they are still seeking to find the pilots. And in the Strait of Hormuz, they didn't find any way to open it. Even the Europeans hadn't joined because everybody has got the message of their defeat. So they're sort of threatening people. Yes, they are rocket bombing the cities and towns and villages. They have slaughtering women and children. The vital infrastructure in Iran, the vital civil infrastructure is bombed by them. But it doesn't mean that Iranians will lose the war. What is running is, at the end, who has the control on the Strait of Hormuz, energy markets, and how, even if you add Bab al-Mandab to this calculation, then they understand who is winning the war.
Okay, I mean, many would argue, though, it's not even about winning now because there are definitions of winning that contradict each other on both sides. The problem in the immediate term right now is whether or not you think the United States will do what President Trump is threatening, even if it is considered a war crime under international law. Do you think the American administration will deliver on this recent ultimatum?
You see, they are coming from genocidal backgrounds. So in Iran, everything is expected. If you say a nuclear attack, I won't be wondered because we know that what sort of monsters we are facing. But at the same time, I think this would be a balance in the battleground because 10 days is shrinking to 5 days, 5 days to 24. 48 hours, then 24 hours. These sorts of ultimatums, however, may bring some destruction. They are just destroying the bridges in a very civil areas. They're killing people, as I said. Hundreds and thousands of houses in residential areas, schools, hospitals, all were bombed. But it can have the same retaliation in the region. The whole region would go to dark and cold if they do what they promised to do. And so if they are daring, we're prepared to have the retaliation the same.
Right. So, Negah, having heard that, what do you expect to happen here? And because we have to remember, even if the strait is reopened, it won't necessarily stay open. And one also has to hope insurers will still be willing to insure the vessels that get through, which really could prove the deal breaker here. They can say it's open, but if commercial traffic doesn't open up, the economy remains in the same dire condition.
Right. I mean, like you've sort of articulated to a certain point, I mean, there's multiple layers in this conversation right now. So the conversation of today is about whether or not there is some sort of ceasefire track. I don't think the ceasefire track necessarily is dead. You do have mediators having conversations right now. There's a draft proposal under discussion by the mediators. We've heard reporting that there are variations to the draft proposal. That's a very normal procedure of any negotiations, that you're going to have multiple options on the table to try to assess both parties' parties can assess where they are. So I think there's quite a bit on that. And as you've said, I mean, there is a huge conversation right now and on this, the critical obstacle of not only trust, but on both sides. You know, will Iran actually open the Hormuz Strait? Will it be, will this temporary pause allow for vessels to go through? Again, you know, the risk is quite high in terms of the premiums of ships going through the strait at this moment. Will it be, you know, will it be continued by the regime or not? There's quite a bit of uncertainty. Obviously, the insurance spikes continue. The fear of shipping markets continue. The markets will be concerned for quite some time, but it's a bargaining chip, and that's a part of that conversation. And we're going to have to see what happens over the next few days.
Yeah, Negah, you bring up the kind of potential negotiations going on behind the scenes right now. There have been suggestions that there is a proposal this time firmly on the table in Pakistan. Would you suspect then that maybe Trump's rhetoric at this point is very aware that that proposal is making progress, and that's why he can up the rhetoric right now, because they are close to a deal?
President Trump has always, you know, pushed out mixed messaging. That is his style, you know, and his style is sort of coercive diplomacy. That is essentially the way he operates. But I do think, you know, the real deliberations that lie with him at this moment in time, whether he walks away and declares victory, or this continues to escalate until submission. But again, you know, both parties have to be engaged. And as we've seen quite a bit, Iran has dug in their heels. So it's a complete contrast to the reactions. They've essentially said no more ultimatums. They do want real negotiations. So there might be some effort. I think when we talk about ceasefires, though, a lot of times, you know, ceasefires feel like they're just on paper, especially if they believe that the other side will react to it. So we're going to have to see. But we'll learn, I think, a lot more this afternoon.
Okay. Barry, I need to ask you this. Step back for 1 second and just ask what you make personally of the language that President Trump has been using. Some of his supporters, we know they like that he's not a diplomat, but some are saying this really is a step too far, even for them. I mean, it sounds like he's back in, you know, the WWE wrestling ring. This is not language that's becoming of a president, even for Trump.
What can you say? He's unpredictable, and he's not a politician, and that's why he did get elected. The Republicans obviously support him, and I see what he's posted there. I've read it a couple of times. I was in shock as well. Maybe not the best choice of words on Easter, I will say that, but President Trump is who he is. He gets the job done. When he is on a mission, I'd say stay out of his way and let him do his job. You know, with the whole Iranian situation right now, we have the 15-point plan that is being negotiated. All these items haven't even been released. We're just speculating on what these items are. I believe this is just simply a negotiation and an opportunity for the regime to step down before President Trump goes into a potential ground operation, which is looking more and more feasible.
And you, Barry, still do not fear Iran's response to that potential ground invasion, saying, kind of come at us. This is where we can prove what military we have and how you are completely out of your depth sending U.S. troops onto Iranian territory.
Well, they've been saying that since 1979. They've been saying that about their Navy and their Air Force, and look what we've done to them now. Again, Iran is not Venezuela. It's not Iraq. It's double the size of Iraq. If we send ground troops in there, we're going to take casualties just like any other war. But I don't see a path forward. This, to me, would be all a waste of time for Israel and the United States unless Allied forces or U.S. forces goes into Tehran and occupies the seat of government, makes that regime fall, and then again allows the people of Iran to choose new leadership. But I just think this regime has expired. No one is going to tolerate them being in power anymore, especially with the threats to Israel and what they've done to the Gulf state allies, launching ballistic missiles. And now imagine if they had a nuke. That means they probably would have nuked Kuwait, Bahrain, or even Oman. Who knows? So I think they've just met their expiration, and that's pretty much what I'm hearing around town.
Okay, Zohreh, I know you disagree with every point Barry has just made there, but I have to ask you about something else, because we know Iran has actually doubled, ironically, its oil profits since the war broke out. Authorities are actually, they've been in negotiations with individual countries now that are seeking safe passages, and we're seeing more ships go through. So if there are eventually or right now negotiations with the United States, what is it that Iran's demands exactly are now that it's making more money than it has before? What would really bring Iran to give up its leverage over the Strait of Hormuz?
You know, I think that the Americans are watching Hollywood movies a lot, and they think that the battles that they are just imaging there is something that's coming to be realized in Iran. That's absolutely wrong. Iran's demands are very clear. The facts on the ground should change. Iran is not tolerating the neighboring Arab entities to be the platforms of acts of aggression against Iran anymore. Iran would establish its authority on the Strait of Hormuz, and it keep on to be so. And as you know, that the Strait of Hormuz is not really closed, because the friends and allies are passing well, and it's the hostiles and atrocities that are actually adversaries that are standing behind. And also the ceasefire, because the Americans are not really trustful. You know, they used even the negotiations twice as the cloaks of doing acts of aggression and military assault against Iran. So I think the ceasefire should be something with verifiable, irreversible, actually, guarantees. And at the same time, Iran has regional allies. Look at Hezbollah. Look at Yemen, look at Iraqi resistance, how these nations are defending themselves, and also Iran as an ally at the same time. So the ceasefire should be something regional and peace for everyone or for no one.
Okay, let me ask Negah if you agree that, as Zohreh was saying, Iran is generally much stronger, especially via its proxies, than it's given credit for? Or do you think Tehran is being a bit delusional about how much leverage it really does have outside of the Strait of Hormuz?
I think, again, every region has its strengths and every region has its weaknesses. I think the key issue that we've seen throughout the last several weeks is, I think there has been some misunderstandings in terms of how Iran thinks and Iran operates. So for Iran, because the Islamic Republic's ruling ideology is built around resistance, it's not, a normal cost-benefit actor that folds when pressured. And I think pressure often reinforces the regime's internal story that survival essentially equals victory. And so a lot of the way they have been posturing their rhetoric, their tactics have essentially been articulating that. And the unfortunate part is some of the West's sort of reoccurring mistakes is conflating Iran's national interests with regime interests. And so what, helps ordinary Iranians, which essentially, as you can imagine, is stability and reintegration, that threatens a security state that survives on isolation and militancy. And so I think, to answer your question, the regime's tactics is, playing off of these various factors, and how the United States, the West, sort of engages with the regime in this sort of coercive diplomacy has been, not as clear as it could be, because there was this misconception that potentially the regime is concerned about its own citizens rather than its survival.
Yeah. Do you think, Negah, that the administration in the United States just has not accepted that the outcome of this could be a strengthening of the regime itself through the IRGC with a weakening of the very people that the United States said it wanted to help by bombing their infrastructure, by killing civilians, not giving them the opportunity to rise up as President Trump himself had called for. So strengthening the regime while weakening the people.
I think, some of the rhetoric and some of the messages that we've heard coming out of the administration has been the idea of taking out these infrastructures that are utilized by the IRGC, knowing sometimes the consequences that it has on civilian lives, civilian infrastructure. But a lot of this has been a bit of blunt escalation. And that can be a concern because it will allow for the Iranian regime to build off of that rhetoric, to create more propaganda against the West. And again, we get the rally around the flag sort of feelings. And that's the concern. You hear quite a bit, whatever you can hear coming out of the country, because continue to have an internet blackout. But there are these concerns, right? There's this inherent constant fear of attacks from all sides. And that's the unfortunate bit. But again, some of the rhetoric that we've been hearing is the more we can crush the regime's ability to operate and function, the sooner they will fall, since the IRGC hasn't surrendered their arms yet.
Yeah. Let me ask Barry then.
Actually, sorry, may I raise the point that this lady sounds to be an Iranian, but you know that he is inside the American government, and the Iranian civilians' blood is on her hands, as other advisors who pushed with misinformations, given misinformations to the American decision makers, talking about the regime and some illusions that we are not seeing in the streets. We are here as insiders, but the native informants are really vital to make this disinformations and misinformations inside the United States. So understanding, understanding the facts on the ground needs to be an insider, that she is not, unfortunately, coming from such a background.
Negah, do you accept that critique?
Look, I
think just looking at her CV is telling that how some clearances you need to enter White House, and she already has got this clearances. So accepting or not accepting doesn't change the reality.
Go ahead, Negah.
Again, I am an American of Iranian heritage, and again, given my heritage background, given the diaspora, given the fact that everyone will have, friends of friends even, and gaining information on the ground from reputable sources, from friends, that is what I'm able to share and project. And as I guess I assume your guest has already reviewed my profile, my academic and professional career will be able to stand for my analysis.
Okay, I'll tell you what.
For her information, 150 of historic sites, because Iran is coming from a rich civilization, so 150 historic sites was bombed by Israelis and Americans. And still, as I said, the blood of the civilians and just losing this heritage again is at hands of such people.
Okay, Barry, I can see you disagree with at least Zohreh's narrative. We've got 1 minute left. Go ahead.
I can't take it anymore, so I got to step in. I think she's living the illusion, actually. They're not targeting infrastructure or historical sites. Why would the Americans waste $1 million bomb on a historical site? It serves no interest to the Israelis.
You can deny they're being targeted, Barry, but we have verification that they've been hit. Whether or not it was intentional is another discussion. They're being hit.
That he's arming the protesters in Iran. He said that Mossad is at the middle of the Iranian streets, as Israelis revealed. So who they are hitting? Can you just tell us? It's very interesting.
So there are this is all out war. There is obviously mistakes. I imagine if anything was hit, like you're saying, it would be accidental. It serves no purpose to the United States, Israel, or the people of Iran to hit a mosque or a historical site. And right now, your guest is in Tehran. Do you hear any bombs going off? She has power. She has infrastructure to be on this interview. So I think there is a little propaganda coming out of Tehran from her very mouth itself.
But also, Barry, you have the president threatening to bomb Iran back to the Stone Age.
Access to internet is provided to all university professors. I'm not an exception, of course.
Well, certainly if the Americans were bombing, that would be tough for you to do, right?
Okay.
I think that the MC 130, that $100 million you spent to build, yesterday was just hit by some locals in Isfahan. So I think that you may just take time to understand what are the realities on the ground of this battle.
Okay.
Well, just know that we are not against the people of Iran, ma'am. You are honorable, and I respect your opinion.
Pilots, of course, was a very interesting one with a lot of the helicopters and aircrafts all hit and on the ground, actually blown on the ground. So these pictures are really interesting, not only for Iranians, but also for Palestinians, but for Yemenis, that you are sharing their genocide.
Okay.
And one final word, if I could. She's the one that is saying, she is the one that says, if Iran doesn't get the peace that they want, nobody gets peace in the Middle East. That's their objective. They want no peace for anybody. So if they're not happy, they're going to attack everybody.
Yeah.
That's like
after decades of suffrage, after decades of your economic terrorism against Iran, this is the time that you learn that every region has a boss, and Iran is the one in this region. You learn it in realities of the battleground.
Well, they don't like the results, so they're going to attack every. So I hope our Gulf State allies are watching right now.
And you have some hints. How much you can talk down the price of the energy. We are just patient enough to see the prices very soon.
Okay, Barry and Zohreh, that unfortunately we are completely over time for this edition of the Newsmakers. So I'd like to thank all three of my panelists so much for being with us. We'll continue this conversation, I'm sure, again in the near future. So for now, thanks to our viewers as well. Remember, you can follow us on social media. Do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.